I stared at the screen, my chest hollowing out at the comment. She is the one who makes us proud. On the counter, my store-bought cake sat unlit on my 30th birthday, just as I wondered if they had simply forgotten me. My phone buzzed with a bank alert. A transaction for several $1,000s had just cleared, perfectly timed with my sister's flight to Paris. The name authorizing the transfer was not my parents', it was my husband's. My name is Emery Ramirez. And today, under the slate-gray sky of a Cleveland October, I turned 30 years old. 30 is supposed to be a milestone. The magazines and the lifestyle blogs tell you it is the year you finally stop apologizing for who you are, the year you settle into your skin, the year you command respect. But as I stood in the center of my kitchen, the silence of the apartment felt less like peace and more like a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant, muffled traffic from the highway that cut through the city like a scar. My husband, Vince Russo, had left 20 minutes ago. Our morning had played out with the scripted efficiency of a business partnership that was failing to meet its quarterly projections. He had been rushing, his tie already knotted tight against his throat, a travel mug of coffee gripped in one hand while the other patted his pockets for keys. I had stood by the island, waiting for the pause, the moment where he would stop, look at me, and acknowledge the date. I had even worn the silk blouse he used to say he liked, the one that caught the light, hoping it might jog his memory. It did not. He had kissed my cheek, a dry, perfunctory contact that lasted less than a second. He told me he had to run, that there were urgent errands he needed to handle before he got to the firm, that the tax season prep was starting early this year. He told me not to wait up for dinner because he might be pulling a late one. He did not say happy birthday. He did not ask why there was a small, white bakery box sitting on the counter. He just left, the heavy oak door clicking shut and sealing me inside with the quiet. I told myself it was fine. 30 was just a number. It was 3 decades of existence, nothing more. I was an adult. I did not need balloons or a parade. I had a job at Brightwell Client Systems that paid the bills. I had a husband who, on paper, was the envy of every girl I went to high school with. Vince was handsome, employed, and never raised his voice. We had a joint checking account, a mortgage, and a life that looked perfectly calibrated from the outside, but the silence in the kitchen was loud enough to scream. I walked over to the counter and opened the white box. Inside sat a 6-inch vanilla cake I had bought for myself yesterday at the grocery store on my way home from work. I had asked the woman at the bakery counter to write Happy 30th on it in blue icing, but she had misheard me or just not cared. So it simply said Happy 30. It looked incomplete. It looked like a typo. I pulled out my phone. It was 9 in the morning. No texts, no missed calls. My mother usually called by 8. My father usually sent a text with too many emojis by 8:30. Today, nothing. The notification screen was blank, save for a weather alert warning of rain and a reminder from my dentist. I unlocked the screen and opened Instagram. It was a masochistic reflex, a muscle memory I could not stop. My thumb hovered over the icon, and then I tapped it. The first thing that loaded was a photo of my sister, Sabrina Ramirez, 26 years old, the baby, the golden child. The one who had never had an awkward phase, never had to work a summer job she hated, never had to worry about where the money for her next car payment was coming from because things just worked out for Sabrina. The photo was high definition, bright, and loud. She was standing in the middle of the international terminal at the airport, holding up a passport in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. She was wearing a beige trench coat that I knew cost more than my first car. Her smile was wide, dazzling, the kind of smile that demanded you stop scrolling and pay attention. The caption read, "Surprise of a lifetime. Mom and Dad just gifted me the dream trip to Paris. Can't believe I'm spending the next 2 weeks eating croissants and living my best life. Paris-bound blessed travel goals." I froze. My thumb stayed pressed against the glass. Paris. They had sent her to Paris. A trip to Europe was not a casual gift. It was thousands of dollars, It was the kind of money my mother claimed they did not have when I mentioned my car needed new brakes last month. It was the kind of money my father said was too tight when I suggested we all go out for a nice dinner for my birthday. I scrolled down to the comments. There were dozens of them already. Cousins, aunts, friends from our old neighborhood. So jealous. Have a blast, you deserve it. Sab. Send pics. And then, right at the top, pinned by Sabrina herself, was the comment from my mother. She is the one who makes us proud. The words hit me with the physical force of a slap. I read them again. She is the one who makes us proud. Not, we are so happy for you. Not have a safe trip. She is the one who makes us proud. The implication hung there, invisible and heavy. If she was the one, what was I? Was I the one who existed to pay the bills? The one who was reliable and boring and forgettable? I looked at the timestamp on the comment. It was posted 40 minutes ago. 40 minutes ago, on the morning of my 30th birthday. My mother was not thinking about the daughter she birthed 3 decades ago. She was busy curating the public image of the daughter she actually liked. I put the phone down on the counter next to the unlit cake. My hands were trembling. A fine, high-frequency vibration that rattled the silverware when I picked up a fork. I took a bite of the cake straight from the box. The frosting was waxy and too sweet. It tasted like chemicals and self-pity. I was chewing, trying to swallow past the lump in my throat. When the phone buzzed against the granite countertop, it was a sharp, aggressive vibration. Not a text. I looked at the screen. A banner from the bank app was flashing. Transaction alert. Chase Sapphire preferred. International transaction approved. I frowned. We did not use that card often. That card was attached to the joint account. The emergency fund that my mother had guilted me into setting up 3 years ago. She had cried at her kitchen table, talking about rising medical costs, about how terrifying it was to get older without a safety net. She had asked if Vince and I could help them build a cushion, just in case. Vince, ever the dutiful son-in-law, had insisted. He said it was what families did. He said I should set up an automatic transfer every payday so I would not even have to think about it. So I did, every 2 weeks, for 3 years. $500 left my paycheck and went into that account. I had never touched it. I thought of it as a shield, something to protect my parents from disaster. I swiped the notification to open the app. Face ID scanned my features, red eyes, pale skin, and logged me in. The balance at the top of the screen was wrong. It was not just a little wrong, it was decimated. The available balance, which should have been hovering near $36,000, was sitting at $4,000. My breath hitched. I tapped on the transaction history, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Pending global travel concierge services, $7,450. Pending Charles de Gaulle Airport duty-free, $620. Pending Le Maurice Hotel deposit, $2,800. I stared at the numbers. They were not abstract figures. They were hours of my life. They were overtime shifts I had picked up when I was exhausted. They were the lunches I skipped to save money. They were the vacations Vince and I did not take because family comes first. $7,000 for a concierge service. That was not just a flight. That was a first-class experience. That was a curated itinerary. My mother had not just given Sabrina a trip. She had given Sabrina my savings. But as I scrolled down, past the pending charges and into the posted transactions from the last 48 hours, the floor dropped out from under me completely. There were transfers. Transfer to S. Ramirez, $1,000. Memo gift. Transfer to S. Ramirez, $500. Memo shopping. And then, buried 3 days ago, a transfer that made the bile rise in my throat. Transfer out. $3,000. It did not say travel. It did not say parents. The recipient was listed only by initials, a shorthand the bank app used for frequent internal transfers between linked accounts or known contacts. V.R. I blinked, waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves. They did not. V.R. Vince Russo. My husband. My husband, who had kissed me goodbye 20 minutes ago without looking me in the eye. My husband, who had told me he was running errands. My husband, who had encouraged me to set up this account to help the family. A coldness washed over me, starting at my fingertips and spreading inward, freezing the heat of the humiliation I had felt just moments ago. This was not just my parents favoring Sabrina. This was not just me being the unloved older sister. This was theft. And it was a conspiracy. Vince knew. He had to know. You do not receive a $3,000 transfer by accident. You do not ignore a joint account draining $30,000 in a week unless you are the one pulling the plug. I looked at the cake again. Happy 30. The sadness that had been weighing down my shoulders evaporated. It was replaced by something much sharper, much clearer. It was the feeling of clarity you get after a fever breaks. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was so desperate for their approval, so conditioned to be the doormat, that I would not check. Or maybe they thought that even if I did check, I would not do anything about it. I was Emery, after all. Emery the peacemaker. Emery the provider. Emery who just wanted everyone to get along. They were right about the old Emery, but the Emery who turned 30 today was done. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not throw the cake against the wall, even though the urge to destroy something was pulsing in my veins. I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room. I sat down on the beige sofa that Vince had picked out. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark room. I created a new folder on the desktop. I did not name it family. I did not name it vacation. I typed one word, receipts. I logged into the bank website. The full desktop version where you could see everything: IP addresses, timestamps, authorized user logs. I started downloading every statement, every transfer confirmation, every check image. I went back 6 months, then 12, then 24. The printer in the home office hummed to life, the sound harsh in the quiet apartment. Paper began to slide into the tray, sheet after sheet of evidence. She is the one who makes us proud, Ken. I watched the progress bar on the download screen. Let's see how proud they are when I send them the bill. The printer tray was warm against my fingertips as I pulled the first stack of paper from the machine. The pages were still fresh with ink, smelling of chemicals and heat, a scent that suddenly reminded me of the high school library where I had spent my evenings while Sabrina was at cheer practice. That was the dynamic, established before I was even old enough to understand the concept of roles. Sabrina was the star. I was the stage crew. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the physical evidence of my own stupidity, and I let myself drift back to the beginning. It was not hard to find the origin point. It was stitched into the fabric of every family dinner, every holiday, every report card day. I remembered being 16 years old. I had come home with a 98% on my chemistry final, the highest grade in the sophomore class. I had placed the paper on the kitchen counter, hoping for a moment of recognition, maybe a celebratory dinner or just a look that said, "Well done." Instead, my mother had glanced at it while chopping onions and said, "That is good. Emery, at least we never have to worry about you." 10 minutes later, Sabrina, who was 12, had walked in with a participation ribbon from a swim meet where she had finished 5th out of 6. My father had swept her up in a hug, calling her his little champion, promising her ice cream, talking about her potential. Emery can take care of herself. That was the refrain of my life. It sounded like a compliment. It sounded like they were acknowledging my competence, my independence. But as I looked at the bank statements spread out on the carpet, I realized it was never a compliment. It was a permission slip. It was permission for them to ignore me because I required no maintenance. It was permission to funnel all their energy, all their affection, and eventually, all my money, into the child who demanded to be seen. The joint account, the leak in the bottom of my financial life had started 3 years ago. I closed my eyes and I could see the scene perfectly. We were at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. The air had been thick with the smell of pot roast and anxiety. My mother had waited until dessert to start crying. It was a quiet, terrified weeping that stopped the conversation dead. She talked about the rising cost of my father's blood pressure medication. She talked about the property taxes inching up. She talked about the terrifying, gnawing fear of being one emergency away from losing the house. "We just want to hold on," she had said, clutching a napkin. "We do not want to be a burden on you girls." Sabrina, who was working a part-time retail job she hated and living rent-free in their basement at the time, had looked stricken but helpless. She had no money to give. All eyes had turned to me. I was the manager at a logistics firm. I was the one with the benefits package. I was the one who had just married Vince, a man with a solid career in finance. "We can help." I had said. I remembered the words leaving my mouth. They tasted like duty. They tasted like the only way to buy their love. And Vince, God, Vince. I opened my eyes and looked at the name on the transfer log, VR. Back then, he had been the picture of the supportive partner. On the drive home that night, he had taken my hand and squeezed it. "You are a good daughter, Emery," he had told me, his voice smooth and reassuring in the dark car. "It is the right thing to do. Family supports family. But listen, do not stress yourself out writing them checks every time they have a crisis. It is too emotional. Let's just set up a direct deposit, $500 a paycheck. It builds a safety net for them, and you never even have to look at it. Out of sight, out of mind, out of sight, out of mind." It was such a logical suggestion. It was so protective. He wanted to save me the mental load. He wanted to spare me the difficult conversations. I had looked at him and thought I was the luckiest woman in the world to have a husband who did not resent my family's neediness, but instead built a system to manage it. I had trusted him because he knew how to say the things that a good husband is supposed to say. I had trusted him because I was desperate to believe that we were a team. But looking back now, through the lens of a $3,000 transfer to his personal account, the past 6 months took on a sickening clarity. Vince had been different lately. The smooth, easygoing man I married had become jagged. He was constantly checking his phone, hiding the screen when I walked into the room. He snapped at me about the electric bill being $20 higher than usual. When I suggested we upgrade the sofa, he had panicked, his eyes wide and fearful, telling me we needed to be liquid, that the economy was unstable, that I was spending too freely. "You worry about the wrong things," he had said to me just last week when I asked why our personal savings account wasn't growing as fast as I calculated it should. "Stop obsessing over the numbers. Emery, you are going to give yourself an ulcer. Let me handle the finances. That is my job. Right?" He was gaslighting me to cover a deficit he created. He was stressed about money because he was funneling it out to the back door. I picked up a page from the pile. It was a statement from 4 months ago. "Transfer to S. Ramirez, $200, memo car repair. Transfer to S. Ramirez, $300, memo groceries. Transfer to S. Ramirez, $150, memo hair appointment." I laughed. A dry cracking sound in the empty apartment. A hair appointment. My sister was getting highlights on my dime while I was dyeing my own roots in the bathroom sink to save $60. It was not just the money. Money can be earned back. It was the value system it represented. I realized then that I did not actually want to be pampered. I did not need a trip to Paris. I did not need a parade. I just wanted to exist to them. I wanted my existence to matter as much as hers, but the evidence was right here in black and white. When was the last time my mother called me just to ask how my day was? I tried to remember. I couldn't. Every call started with a complaint. "The furnace is making a noise. Your dad's back is hurting. Sabrina is so depressed because her boyfriend broke up with her. Can you talk to her?" I was not a daughter. I was a utility. I was a service provider. I was the family ATM and the emotional dumpster. And Sabrina was the protagonist. Her life was a series of dramatic arcs that required audience participation. When she got a flat tire, it was a tragedy. When she broke a nail, it was a crisis. When she wanted to go to Paris, it was a necessity for her spiritual growth. And I was the producer of the show, working behind the scenes, paying for the lights and the costumes, standing in the dark while she took the bow. The comment on Instagram burned in my memory. She is the one who makes us proud. Why? Why did she make them proud? Because she lived the life they wanted. She was beautiful and carefree and worldly. She represented the fantasy. I represented the reality. I was the boring job. I was the budget. I was the discipline. No one applauds the discipline. They applaud the result, even if they have to steal the resources to create it. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was now 2 p.m. Vince would be home in 4 hours. He would walk through that door, loosen his tie, and ask me what was for dinner. He would probably have a cheap bouquet of flowers from the grocery store, a guilt offering because he forgot the morning. He would smile that practiced, reassuring smile, and tell me he loved me. My stomach turned. I stood up and walked to the window. The street below was gray and wet. It was a Tuesday in Cleveland. It was cold, 4,000 miles away. Sabrina was likely sitting in a cafe in the Latin Quarter, watching the sunset over the Seine. She was probably wearing a new scarf she bought with the card linked to my account. She was sipping wine I paid for. She was feeling loved and special and supported. She was living a lie. But it was a beautiful lie. My reality was this cold apartment and a stack of paper that proved the 3 people I loved most in the world viewed me as nothing more than a resource to be harvested. I felt a shift inside me. It was the final click of a lock falling into place. The sadness was gone. The shock was fading. What was left was cold, hard, and functional. I was the capable one, wasn't I? That was what they always said. Emery can handle it. Emery will figure it out. Well, they were right. I was going to handle it. But they had forgotten one crucial thing about the capable child. We are the ones who know how the systems work. We are the ones who read the fine print. We are the ones who keep the records. And when we stop holding the roof up, the whole house comes down. I turned back to the laptop. I had enough emotional context. I needed more data. I needed to see exactly where every single cent had gone. I needed to know if Vince's betrayal stopped at the bank account or if it went deeper. I sat back down and began to sort the papers, not by date, but by recipient. 1 pile for Sabrina, 1 pile for my parents, and 1 growing, terrifying pile for Vince Russo. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, but I did not turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, illuminated only by the blue glow of the screen, counting the cost of my own erasure. I was not just calculating numbers anymore. I was calculating the exact weight of my vengeance. The laptop screen was the only source of light in the room, casting a clinical blue-white glow over my hands. I felt like a coroner performing an autopsy, but instead of a body, I was dissecting the corpse of my financial security. I had moved past the shock of the Paris trip. Paris was just the headline. I needed to read the article. I needed to understand the mechanics of the machine that had been harvesting my income for the last 2 years. I opened the spreadsheet software and started entering data manually. I did not trust the bank's categorization tools. They were too broad. I needed granularity. I created columns. Date, amount, recipient, memo, my location, Vince's location. I started with the search term, transfer. The results populated the screen in a cascading list that made my stomach drop. It was not just the occasional emergency fund for my parents. It was a payroll system. On the 15th of every month, like clockwork, there was a transfer of $400 to Sabrina's account. The memos changed slightly, but the theme was consistent. Support, help, groceries, books. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. Books. Sabrina had graduated college 4 years ago. She had not picked up a book since. I scrolled back to last November. There was a single. Massive outflow of $2,500. The memo read, Studio Deposit/branding. I stopped breathing for a moment. I remembered that month. That was the month Sabrina had decided she was going to be a lifestyle curator on social media. She had posted a series of professional photos, headshots with perfect lighting, a newly designed logo for her page, and a website that looked sleek and expensive. I remembered liking the post. I remembered commenting, "Looks great, Sab. Good luck." I had paid for it. I had paid for the lighting that made her look glowing while I sat under the fluorescent hum of my office. I had paid for the logo that stamped her brand of effortless luxury onto the world. I kept typing, the rhythm of the keys sounding like gunfire in the silent apartment. I summed up the column for the last 24 months. The cursor blinked, and then the total appeared in bold at the bottom of the screen. $42,850. I stared at the number. $42,000. That was not a safety net for aging parents. That was a down payment on a house in the suburbs. That was a master's degree. That was the seed money for the business. I had always talked about starting but never did, because Vince said we weren't liquid enough yet. We weren't liquid because my liquidity was being siphoned into Sabrina's vanity projects and my parents' delusions of grandeur, but the what was only half the equation. I needed the how. Modern banking is not easy to crack. It requires passwords. It requires two-factor authentication. It requires a device that the bank recognizes. I looked at the timestamps of the transfers. November 12th at 6:30 in the evening, December 14th at 7:15 in the evening, January 10th at 8 o'clock at night. They were all in the evening. They were all times when I was typically home. I closed my eyes and tried to reconstruct the scenes. November 12th. That was a Tuesday. I usually cooked on Tuesdays. Vince usually sat at the island, drinking a glass of wine, chatting with me while I chopped vegetables. "Hey, babe, can I borrow your phone? Mine is dead and I need to look up that restaurant for the weekend." The memory surfaced, clear and sharp. "Emery, hand me your phone for a second. I want to show you this listing. Honey, your dad is texting but my hands are wet. Can you check it? Oh, wait. Just unlock it for me." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He did not hack me. I handed him the keys. He used my trust as a bypass code. Every time he asked for my phone to look something up or check the score, he was logging into the banking app. He was initiating the transfer. He was catching the 6-digit verification code as it flashed across the top of the screen, memorizing it, and then deleting the message before handing the device back to me with a smile. It was predatory. It was not just theft. It was a violation of intimacy. He used the domestic comfort of our evenings, the safety of our kitchen, as a cover for financial extraction. I needed to verify this hypothesis. I needed to see how bold he really was. I picked up my phone. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. I opened my messages with Vince. The last text was from him at 9 in the morning. "Meeting is running long. Don't wait up." I typed, "Hey, just got a weird notification from the joint account. Did you see these charges for a travel agency?" I hit send. I watched the screen. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly. He was looking at his phone. He was probably terrified. Or maybe he was arrogant enough to think he could spin this too. The reply came through a minute later. "Oh, yeah. Your mom called me earlier. I think they were trying to surprise Sabrina for her birthday or something. They must have mixed up the cards on file. I told them to fix it when they get back. Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." I read the text twice. They must have mixed up the cards. It was such a lazy lie. You do not mix up a card that requires a zip code and a security code. You do not accidentally spend $10,000 on a card you are not authorized to use. And then the kicker. "I'll handle it." Translation, "I will bury it before you look too closely." He was protecting them. He was covering for them. He was the gatekeeper of the lie. I did not reply to him. Instead, I dialed my mother. It was a risk. If she answered, I might lose my temper. But I needed to hear the tone of her voice. I needed to know if there was even a shred of guilt on the other end of the line. The phone rang 4 times. "Hello?" Her voice was distracted, loud, in the background. I could hear the distinct, echoing chime of an airport PA system and the murmur of a crowd. "Mom," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat, detached. I saw the notification. The Paris trip. There was a pause, a beat of silence where a normal mother might apologize. might explain, might sound embarrassed. "Oh, Emery," she sighed, sounding exasperated. "Can we talk about this later? We are just boarding and the connection is terrible. Sabrina is so excited. You should see her. She really needed this boost, you know? She has been feeling so stuck lately." "Stuck," I repeated. "Mom, that is my money. That is the money for your medical bills. It is family money." "Emery," she snapped, her tone shifting from distracted to defensive. "Stop being so dramatic. We will pay it back when the tax return comes in. Or Vince will sort it out. He understands that sometimes you have to prioritize morale. Look, the stewardess is waving at me. I have to go. Mom, do not hang. Bye." "Sweetie, happy birthday." The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. "Happy birthday." She said it as an afterthought, a throwaway line to end the call, like drive safe. There it was, the truth, stripped of all the polite fiction I had wrapped around it for years. It was not that they forgot me. It was that I was a resource. You do not thank a resource. You do not apologize to a generator for using its electricity. You just plug in and take what you need. Vince understands that sometimes you have to prioritize morale. The sentence stuck in my brain like a splinter. Vince understood. Vince was the good son. Vince was the enabler. I turned back to the spreadsheet. My anger was cooling into something solid and sharp, like forged steel. I went back to the Vince's location column. I had found the transfers to Sabrina. I had found the transfers to my parents. But there was something else. A pattern I had missed in the first scan because the amounts were smaller, more irregular. April 14th, 2 years ago. April 15th, last year. October 15th, last year. Tax deadlines. On each of those dates, there was a transfer out of the joint account, not to Sabrina, not to my parents, to a vendor listed as VR Consulting Group. The amounts were specific: $1,200, $1,800, $2,000. The memo line simply said, "Tax prep/admin fee." I frowned. Vince was a CPA. He did our taxes. He did my parents' taxes. He prided himself on it. Why would we be paying a consulting group? And then I looked at the initials again. V.R. Vince Russo. I opened a new tab on my browser and went to the Secretary of State's business search portal for Ohio. I typed in VCAR, Consulting Group. The result popped up in less than a second. Registered Agent Vincent A. Russo. Address, our home address. Incorporation date, 2 years ago. I stared at the screen. He had created a shell company. He was billing our joint account for services rendered to do the taxes he claimed he was doing for free as a favor to the family. But it was worse than that. I looked at the dates again. April 14th. I remembered that day. Vince had come home late, looking exhausted, rubbing his temples. "I have been battling with your dad's audit risk all day," he had told me, accepting the beer I handed him. "It is a nightmare. Emery, but I got it done. Saved them a fortune." I had rubbed his shoulders. I had thanked him for being so good to them. He had looked me in the eye and accepted my gratitude, while $1,200 of my money was sitting in his secret business account. He was double-dipping. He was stealing from me to pay my sister, and then stealing from me again to pay himself for the trouble of managing the theft. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. I could not be sick. I had to be thorough. If he had set up a shell company, if he had been accessing the account through my phone, he must have covered his tracks in the bank's security settings. I clicked on the Profile Settings tab of the bank website. I navigated to Alerts and Notifications. I expected to see my email. I expected to see my phone number, and they were there. But there was a secondary contact listed under High-Value Transaction Approvals. It was a phone number I recognized. It was Vince's work cell, but it was the email address that made my blood run cold. Emery Ramirez. Finances Gmail.com. That was not my email. I had never created that account. I opened a new incognito window and tried to log into that Gmail account. I obviously did not have the password, but I clicked Forgot Password just to see the recovery hint. The recovery phone number ended in 88. Vince's number. He had created a digital clone of me. He had created an email address that looked like mine, sounded like mine, and he had linked it to our bank account. When the bank sent an alert asking, "Did you authorize this transfer of $3,000?" the email did not go to me. It went to Emery Ramirez, Finances, and Vince, sitting at his desk at work, or sitting next to me on the couch, would open that email, click "Yes, I approve," and delete it. He had not just stolen my money, he had stolen my identity. He had impersonated me to the bank, to the credit bureaus, probably to the IRS. He had built a puppet Emery, a compliant, silent Emery who approved every donation to the Sabrina Fund, who signed off on every fee he charged. I looked at the real Emery reflected in the dark screen of the laptop. She looked tired, she looked pale, but she looked awake. I picked up my phone again. Vince had sent another text. On my way home, picked up some Thai food. "Let's just relax tonight." Okay. I stared at the words. Let's just relax. He thought he was coming home to the puppet. He thought he was coming home to the wife who believed the lie about the mixed-up cards. He thought he was coming home to the woman who existed only to be used. He was wrong. I reached for the external hard drive I used for work backups. I plugged it into the laptop. I selected the folder named Receipts. I selected the folder named VR, Consulting. I selected the screenshots of the profile settings. I dragged them all onto the hard drive. The progress bar moved across the screen. Green, steady, irreversible. I was not going to scream at him when he walked through the door. I was not going to demand a divorce tonight. That was too messy. That gave him a chance to spin the narrative, to hide the assets, to delete the email account he had created in my name. No, I was going to wait. I was going to let him eat his Thai food. I was going to let him think he had successfully managed the crisis. I was going to let him feel safe, because the only thing more dangerous than a woman who has been scorned is a woman who has been underestimated for 30 years and has finally decided to keep score. The download finished with a cheerful ding. I pulled the hard drive out and slipped it into the inside pocket of my blazer, right next to my heart. The front door lock clicked. "Emery, I'm home." His voice was cheerful, the voice of a man who got away with it. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and stood up to greet my husband. The next morning, I did not go to the company cafeteria for lunch. I did not sit in the break room at Brightwell Client Systems and listen to my colleagues complain about the rain or the new parking policy. Instead, I put on my coat, walked 3 blocks down the street to a coffee shop I never visited, and connected to their public Wi-Fi using a VPN on my personal laptop. I was done using the home network. I was done using my phone for anything that mattered. The first step was not revenge, it was sanitation. I opened the website for a bank that had no physical branches in our neighborhood, a completely different institution from the one Vince and I used. I filled out the application for a new high-yield checking account. When the prompt asked for a funding source, I did not link the joint account. I wrote a check from my personal petty cash stash money I had kept in a physical envelope in my desk drawer at work for emergencies and used the mobile deposit feature. Then came the passwords. For 10 years, my digital life had been an open book to Vince. My passwords were variations of our anniversary, the name of the street we lived on, or his birthday. They were keys I had practically handed him. Today, I generated a string of 20 random characters, symbols, numbers, uppercase, lowercase. I wrote it down on a sticky note, memorized it until my brain hurt, and then tore the note into confetti that I dropped into 3 different trash cans on my way back to the office. I enabled 2-factor authentication on everything: my email, my retirement portal, my payroll login, but I did not set it to send a text message to my phone. Vince knew my passcode. If he had physical access to my phone while I was in the shower, he could intercept the code and delete the thread before I stepped onto the bath mat. I downloaded an authenticator app and hid it inside a folder named Utilities on the 3rd page of my home screen. It felt like paranoia. It felt like I was a spy in my own life. But then I remembered the shell company. I remembered Emery Ramirez, Finances Gmail, com. I was not paranoid. I was reacting to a hostile threat. Back at my desk, The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I logged into the Brightwell HR portal. My hand hovered over the mouse. This was the moment of severance. For 3 years, my paycheck had split automatically. 80% to the joint account, 20% to a savings account that Vince also had access to. I clicked Edit Direct Deposit. I deleted the joint account. I deleted the savings account. I entered the routing number for my new, secret account. I set the distribution to 100%. I clicked Save. My heart slammed against my ribs. A heavy, frantic rhythm. It felt illegal. It felt like I was robbing my own family. The conditioning ran so deep that reclaiming the money I earned with my own labor felt like a betrayal. I had to grip the edge of the desk to stop my hands from shaking. Breathe. I told myself, you are not stealing. You are stopping the bleeding. I took a screenshot of the confirmation page. I saved it to the encrypted flash drive I now kept on my keychain. Then I opened the receipts folder. I created a new spreadsheet recovery plan. I logged into the joint account one last time from the office computer. There was $4,200 remaining. If I took it all, Vince would know immediately. He would get an alert. He would call me in a panic, or worse, with that faux concern he had mastered. I had to be surgical. I initiated a transfer of $800. It was an odd number. It looked like a bill payment. It looked like a car repair. It was not a round. Suspicious 1,000. I waited for the transfer successful banner. I did not feel a rush of victory. I felt cold. I felt efficient. I logged out and cleared the browser cache. My phone buzzed on the desk. I flinched, expecting a text from Vince asking about the $800. It was not Vince. It was a video call request. Sabrina. Her face filled the screen, frozen in a blurry preview. She was wearing a beret, a red beret. She looked like a caricature of a tourist in Paris. The phone vibrated against the wood grain of the desk. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I stared at her smiling face. 2 days ago, I would have answered. I would have swallowed my jealousy and asked her how the croissants were. I would have let her talk for 20 minutes about the handsome waiter she met. And I would have offered to Venmo her $50 for a nice dinner. I watched the timer count down. She was calling me because she needed an audience. A performance is nothing without a spectator. She needed me to witness her joy so that it became real. She needed me to validate the theft. Even if she did not know I knew it was theft. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I did not feel guilty. That was the surprise. The guilt, which had been my constant companion for 3 decades, was gone. In its place was a flat, gray silence. I turned back to my monitor. I had money now, or I would. In 2 weeks, when the next pay cycle hit, I needed a goal. Saving was not enough. Money without purpose in my family just became someone else's opportunity. I opened a new tab and searched for Certified Financial Crime Specialist. I had been looking at the program for months. It was expensive, almost $3,000 for the course and the exam. It was intense. It required hours of study on forensic compliance, money laundering protocols, and fraud detection. Vince had told me it was a waste of time. He had said, "Why do you want to go back to school?" Emory. "You have a steady job. We do not need the stress of you studying all night." He did not want me studying fraud detection because he was committing it. I navigated to the registration page. I did not have the money yet, but I bookmarked it. That was where the first full paycheck from my new account was going. I was going to use the money they stole from me to learn how to catch men like my husband. It was poetic. It was necessary. I worked the rest of the afternoon in a fugue state. I answered emails. I sat in a budget meeting. I nodded at the right times. I was the perfect employee. No one looked at me and saw a woman who was systematically dismantling her marriage. They just saw Emory, reliable, quiet Emory. At 5:30, I packed my bag. This was the hardest part, the transition from the general to the spy. I drove home, practicing my face in the rearview mirror. Relax the jaw, soften the eyes, do not look like you know. When I walked into the apartment, the smell of garlic and butter hit me. Vince was in the kitchen. He was wearing an apron over his work clothes. There was a bottle of wine open on the counter, a Pinot Noir. My favorite. Surprise, he said, turning around with a wooden spoon in his hand. He looked handsome. He looked like the man I fell in love with. He looked like a complete fabrication. Vince, I said, keeping my voice level. What is this I felt terrible about yesterday, he said, walking over to me. He went to kiss me, and I had to force myself not to recoil. I let his lips touch my cheek. They felt dry. I was so stressed with work, and I completely dropped the ball on your birthday. So, I am making it up to you. Shrimp scampi and wine. Happy birthday. He held out a glass of wine. I took it. I looked at the dark red liquid. Thank you, I said. You didn't have to do this. Of course I did, he said, turning back to the stove. You are my wife. You deserve to be spoiled. You deserve to be spoiled. The audacity of it made me dizzy. He was using the money he skimmed from our account to buy the shrimp, to apologize for missing the birthday he ignored, because he was too busy hiding the money he stole. It was a snake eating its own tail. How was work? He asked. Casual. Easy. Fine, I said. Quiet. Just paperwork. That is good, he said. Hey, did you see a notification about a transfer today? I got a weird alert on my phone, but when I went to check, the app crashed. My pulse spiked, but I took a sip of wine to cover it. Oh, I said, I paid the car insurance. Maybe that was it. It was a lie. The car insurance was not due for another month. Vince paused. I saw his shoulders stiffen slightly. He was calculating. He knew the car insurance wasn't $800, but he couldn't push it without admitting he was watching the account like a hawk. Right, he said, relaxing. That must be it. I just wanted to make sure we weren't hacked. No, I said, staring at his back. We are safe. We ate dinner. I chewed the shrimp, and it tasted like ash. I listened to him talk about his day, about a difficult client, about how hard he was working to build our future. I nodded. I smiled. I played the role. I was thinking, he said, pouring more wine. Maybe we should look at refinancing the condo. Rates are dropping a little. We could pull some equity out. Maybe pay off your student loans. Have a little cushion. I looked at him. Refinancing. That would require a credit check. That would require my signature. That would put a lump sum of cash into the joint account. Cash he could access. I don't know, I said. I am tired. Vince, can we talk about finances another time? Sure, he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. No pressure. Just thinking ahead. He wasn't thinking ahead. He was desperate. He needed liquidity. The shell company must be hungry. Or maybe the Paris trip cost more than he anticipated. I finished my wine. I am going to take a shower. Go ahead, he said. I will do the dishes. I walked into the bedroom. I locked the door behind me, a habit I started yesterday. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. He had mentioned refinancing. That meant he was thinking about credit. I opened the app for the credit bureau. I had meant to do this yesterday, but I had been so focused on the bank accounts. I navigated to the security freeze section. Freeze my credit report. I toggled the switch. Are you sure? This will prevent new creditors from accessing your file. Yes, I confirmed it with a PIN. Credit frozen. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. He couldn't open a credit card in my name. He couldn't refinance the house without me unlocking it. I stood up to go to the bathroom. My phone buzzed. A notification from the credit monitoring service. Alert new inquiry blocked. I stared at the screen. Attempted inquiry. Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions. Date today. Time, 8:30 in the evening. I looked at the time on my phone. It was 8:31. I looked at the closed bedroom door. Vince was in the kitchen, doing the dishes. Or was he? He had suggested refinancing 5 minutes ago. I had said no, and the moment I left the room, he had tried to run the application anyway. He likely had my social security number memorized. He likely had the application pre-filled on his iPad. just waiting for me to be out of sight. He wasn't just suggesting it, he was doing it. He was trying to take out a loan against our home, in my name, while I was sitting 10 feet away. The only reason it failed was because I had frozen the file 60 seconds ago. I walked to the door and pressed my ear against the wood. I heard the water running in the kitchen, and then, under the sound of the faucet, I heard a noise, a slam, something hard hitting the counter. A fist, a phone. "Damn it," I heard him hiss. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakably angry. He had hit the wall. The freeze had worked. I stepped back from the door. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. He knew. He knew the door was locked. He just didn't know I was the one holding the key. I undressed and turned on the shower, making it loud enough for him to hear. I stepped under the hot water and let it run over my face. The game had changed. It wasn't just investigation anymore. It was active warfare, and I had just fired the first shot. The fallout did not happen immediately. It took 48 hours for the check engine light to come on in my family's financial vehicle. I was at work, sitting in a glass-walled conference room, listening to a junior analyst explain quarterly projections, when my phone vibrated against the mahogany table. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Then a text, "Emergency." "Pick up," I excused myself. Stepping out into the hallway, the carpet was gray, the walls were gray, but the adrenaline spiking in my blood was technicolor bright. I knew exactly what the emergency was. The automatic transfer I had canceled on Tuesday was scheduled to hit their account today, and it hadn't arrived. "Hello," I answered, leaning against the wall, watching the traffic on the highway below. "Emery," my father's voice was tight, high-pitched. It was the voice he used when the plumbing backed up. "Something is wrong with the bank. I was at the pharmacy trying to pick up your mother's prescription, and the card declined. It says insufficient funds." "Okay," I said. My pulse was steady. And, he sputtered. "And you need to call them. There must be a glitch. The transfer usually clears by 9 in the morning. I checked the app and the balance is showing nothing. 0. It is not a glitch. Dad," I said. I kept my voice low, professional. I canceled the transfer. There was a silence on the other end so profound I could hear the static of the line. "You what?" "I canceled the transfer," I repeated. "I also withdrew the funds I had contributed to the joint savings account over the last 3 years. That is why the balance is 0. "Why would you?" he started. But he was cut off. There was a scuffling sound, the phone being fumbled, and then my mother's voice pierced my ear. "Emery, what is your father saying? You took the money." She did not ask. "Are you okay?" She did not ask. "Is something wrong?" She went straight for the asset. "I took my money." "Yes," I said. "That is family money," she shouted. I could hear the echo. She must have been in the car or the house. "We rely on that. You know we have the property tax coming up. You know your father's back treatments are not fully covered. How could you be so selfish after everything we have done for you?" "Everything you have done for me?" I asked. "Like forgetting my 30th birthday." "Oh, for God's sake," she groaned. "Are we still on that? Is this a tantrum because we didn't buy you a cake? You are 30 years old. Emery. Grow up, we have real problems here." "Real problems," I said, "like paying for Sabrina's trip to Paris." The line went dead silent again. This time, the silence had a different texture. It was the silence of someone who had been caught holding the smoking gun. "I saw the transactions. Mom," I said, driving the knife in. "I saw the $7,000 for the concierge. I saw the transfers for her branding studio. I saw the 2 years of support payments." "That is different," my mother said, her voice dropping, shifting from anger to a wheedling, defensive tone. "Sabrina, she is going through a hard time. She needed a win. Emery, she was feeling so lost. We just wanted to give her some motivation. You know how sensitive she is. So you sent her to Paris with my retirement savings. It is an investment in her future," she snapped. regaining her footing. And you are the strong one. You always have been. You can handle the pressure. Sabrina breaks under it. We do what we have to do to keep this family afloat. I thought you understood that. I thought you were part of this team. I am not a teammate, I said. I am the sponsor, and the sponsorship is over. You put that money back, she hissed. Right now, before your father has a heart attack from the stress. Do not do this to us. Emery, a third voice entered the conversation. It wasn't on the phone. It was behind me. I turned around. Vince was standing in the hallway of my office building. He was wearing his coat, holding a briefcase. He looked pale. I am going to hang up now, I said to the phone. Emery, don't you dare, I tapped the red button. I looked at my husband. He had never come to my office in the middle of the day. Not once in 5 years. What are you doing here? I asked. Your dad called me, Vince said. He was breathing hard, like he had run up the stairs. He was frantic. He said you drained the account. He said you were talking crazy. He walked closer, lowering his voice, glancing at the receptionist's desk down the hall. Honey, look, I know you are upset about the birthday thing, and I know the Paris trip looks bad on paper, but you have to calm down. You cannot just cut them off cold turkey. They have bills due on Friday. He reached out to touch my arm. I took a step back. They have bills, I said. And you have a shell company. Vince froze. His hand dropped to his side. His eyes, usually so warm and crinkled at the corners, went flat. What? VR consulting, I said. I know about the fees. Vince, I know you are double-dipping. That is just for tax purposes, he stammered, sweat beading on his upper lip. It is a standard accounting structure. You are misunderstanding the— Stop, I said. Just stop. Emery, listen to me, he pleaded, switching tactics. We can fix this. Just transfer the money back so they can pay the mortgage, and we will sit down tonight and go over everything. I will explain it all. Just don't blow up the family over a misunderstanding. How did you get here so fast? I asked. What? I hung up the phone 30 seconds ago, I said. My office is 20 minutes from yours. How are you standing here? Vince blinked. I told you, your dad called me. When? About, I don't know. An hour ago, when the card declined at the pharmacy. I looked at him, and the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with a deafening thud. My father hadn't called me first. He had called Vince. When the money ran out, they didn't call the source. They called the manager. They called the gatekeeper. They called the man they conspired with to manage the difficult revenue-generating daughter. They called you before they called me, I said. It wasn't a question. They were scared. Emery, they didn't want to upset you. No, I said. They called you because they thought you could fix it. They thought you could make me get back in line. I looked at this man I had shared a bed with, shared a life with, and I felt absolutely nothing. No love, no hate. Just the revulsion you feel when you find a cockroach in your kitchen cabinet. Go back to work, Vince, I said. Emery, go back to work. I have a meeting. I turned and walked back into the conference room. I sat down. I picked up my pen. My hand was not shaking. That night, I moved into the guest bedroom. I did not announce it. I did not throw his clothes on the lawn. I simply took my pillows, my duvet, and my phone charger, and I walked down the hall. Vince stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, watching me. He looked small. He looked like a man who was trying to figure out which lever to pull to make the machine work again. Emery, this is ridiculous, he said. Come back to bed. I closed the door in his face and turned the lock. For the next 3 days, the silence in our apartment was heavy enough to crush bones. We moved around each other like ghosts. He tried to speak to me in the kitchen. I put on noise-canceling headphones. He tried to text me. I did not reply. It was a terrifying kind of silence. It was the silence of a woman who was no longer negotiating. On Friday, Janelle found me in the break room staring at the coffee machine. Janelle was the head of compliance at Brightwell. She was 50 years old, divorced twice, and had eyes that could spot a lie from across the parking lot. "You look different," she said, leaning against the counter. "I am tired," I said. "No," she said. "Tired is what you looked like last week. Today you look sharp, dangerous." I looked at her. Janelle had always been kind to me, but we weren't close. I hesitated. Then I spoke. "I found out my husband and my parents have been stealing from me for 2 years. Janelle didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She took a sip of her coffee and nodded, as if I had told her it was raining outside. "Forensic accounting," she asked. "I downloaded everything," I said. 2 years of statements, shell companies, unauthorized transfers. "Good," she said. "Do you have a lawyer?" "Not yet." "Get one," she said. "And Emery?" "Yeah." "Stop walking around here like you are ashamed. Victims look at the floor. Prosecutors look at the jury. If you have the receipts. You are the one with the power. Act like a winner, and people will believe you are one. Act like a winner." That evening, I went to my first class. The Certified Financial Crime Specialist course was held in a community college annex downtown. The room was filled with people who looked serious. There were police officers, internal auditors, bank managers. I sat in the front row. The instructor was a retired FBI agent with gray hair and a scar on his chin. He started the lecture by talking about the psychology of fraud. "Fraud is not about money," he said. Pacing the front of the room, it is about opportunity and rationalization. The perpetrator has to convince themselves that they deserve the money more than the victim. They have to dehumanize the victim to sleep at night. I wrote that down. Dehumanize the victim. I raised my hand. "Yes," he asked. "Does the rationalization usually involve a narrative of protection?" I asked. "Like, they are stealing to protect the family unit." The instructor looked at me. He smiled, a grim, knowing smile. "That is the most common lie of all," he said. "The Robin Hood complex, stealing from the rich relative to give to the needy one. It is not protection. Simple. It is predation." I felt a flush of heat in my chest. For the first time in 30 years, someone was telling me that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't selfish, I was a victim of predation. I stayed after class to ask him about reading materials. He treated me with respect. He looked me in the eye. He didn't interrupt me. It was intoxicating. When I got home, it was 10 o'clock at night. The apartment was dark. I checked my email on my phone before I unlocked the door. There was a new message from Vince. Subject family budget / moving forward. I frowned. I opened it. "Emery, I know you are hurting, and I want to give you space. But we need to be practical. Your parents are really struggling with the sudden cutoff. I have put together a plan that I think works for everyone. It allows us to pay them back the loan you took the withdrawal over 12 months, while still keeping our own savings goals on track. Please review the attached spreadsheet so we can discuss it this weekend. Love, Vince." Attached was a file named plan_repay_parents ... I stood in the hallway, the light from the street lamp casting long shadows on the floor. Plan to repay parents. He was framing my withdrawal of my own stolen money as a loan I had taken from them. He was reframing the victim as the debtor. He was trying to bureaucratize my submission. I didn't open the attachment. I didn't reply. I walked into the apartment. Vince was sitting on the couch, the blue light of the TV flickering on his face. He looked up, hopeful. "Did you get my email?" he asked. I looked at him. I looked at the man who thought he could solve a felony with a spreadsheet. "I got it," I said. "Good," he said, relaxing. "I think the numbers work. It is tight. But if we cut back on your personal allowance for a few months, we can make them whole." "Make them whole." I smiled. It was a genuine smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "We will see, Vince," I said. "We will see." I walked into the guest room and locked the door. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't open his spreadsheet. I opened my own. I created a new tab. I named it Plan underscore. To underscore destroy underscore Vince. He wanted a repayment plan. I would give him one. But the currency wasn't going to be dollars. It was going to be consequences. The notification came through on a Wednesday afternoon, slicing through the quiet hum of the office like a jagged blade. It was Facebook, a platform I rarely used, kept alive only for the sake of polite social obligation to distant cousins and high school acquaintances. My phone lit up on the desk, displaying the banner that always signaled the beginning of a public execution. Maria Ramirez mentioned you in a post. My stomach did not drop. That was the old reaction. The new Emery. The one who was currently 3 modules deep into a forensic compliance certification. Simply felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I unlocked the phone. There it was. A photo of my mother and me from 5 years ago. Taken at my college graduation. In the picture. She was beaming, clutching my arm. In reality, I remembered she had spent that entire day complaining that the ceremony was too long and that her heels hurt. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive storytelling. "A mother's heart is a heavy thing to carry," she wrote. "You give your life, your blood, and your sweat to raise your children. You sacrifice your own dreams so they can have a future, and in return, you hope for love, you hope for gratitude, but sometimes, the world changes them. Sometimes, they forget where they came from. They turn their backs on family over petty misunderstandings and money. Please pray for our family during this difficult heartbreak. We are strong. But betrayal from your own flesh and blood cuts the deepest. Emery Ramirez. We still love you, no matter how lost you are." It was tactical genius. She hadn't detailed the conflict. She hadn't mentioned the bank transfer or the Paris trip or the shell company. She had framed it entirely as an emotional abandonment. She had cast herself as the martyr and me as the prodigal. Greedy daughter. I watched the comments roll in real time. "So sorry to hear this. Maria. Kids these days just take and take." That was Aunt Linda, who owed my father $2,000 from a loan 10 years ago. "Stay strong. You were the best mother anyone could ask for." That was a neighbor who had never stepped foot in our house. "Emery. Call your mom. Life is too short." This one was from a cousin I hadn't spoken to since her wedding. Vince had liked the post. I stared at that small thumbs-up icon next to his name. My husband. The man living in my guest room. The man who was currently trying to negotiate a repayment plan for his own theft, was publicly endorsing my mother's smear campaign. I did not reply. I did not type a furious defense. I opened the snipping tool on my laptop. I took a screenshot of the post. I took a screenshot of the timestamp. I took a screenshot of Vince's like. I expanded the comments section and captured every single person who jumped on the bandwagon. I dragged the files into the folder marked Receipts, subfolder Harassment. "Don't do it," a voice said. I looked up. Janelle was standing at the door of my cubicle, holding 2 paper cups of tea. She had seen me staring at the screen with the look of a sniper adjusting a scope. "Don't do what?" I asked, minimizing the browser. "Don't engage in the comments section," she said, setting a cup down on my coaster. "That is what they want. They want you to look crazy. They want you to write a paragraph about how they are liars so they can point at it and say, 'See, she is unstable.'" "I am not going to write a paragraph," I said, taking the tea. "I am building a case file." Janelle nodded, pulling up a chair. "Good, because I have a name for you." She slid a sticky note across the desk. On it was a name and a number, Marcus Thorne, family law and financial fraud. "He is expensive," Janelle said, "but he hates bullies. I told him a little bit about your situation hypothetically. Of course, he said the joint account issue is tricky because, technically, you gave them access. The law assumes that money in a joint account is shared property." I felt a sinkhole open in my chest. "So I can't get it back." "Wait," Janelle said, holding up a hand. "He said the joint account is gray, but the shell company, The VR consulting thing, that is not gray, that is fraud, that is tax evasion, that is piercing the corporate veil to hide marital assets. Marcus said that is the lever. If you pull that lever, the whole machine breaks. I looked at the name on the note, Marcus Thorne. It sounded like a weapon. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, Janelle said, standing up. Just win and get out of here by 5. You have studying to do. I did have studying to do. I was halfway through the coursework for the Certified Financial Crimes Specialist exam. The material was dense, filled with regulations about anti-money laundering and know your customer protocols. But for me, it read like a thriller. Every case study was a mirror. Every red flag described in the textbook was something I had seen on my own bank statement. I had also taken a step that terrified me. I had updated my resume. I removed the soft skills. I removed the generic descriptions of team management. I replaced them with hard data, managed budget reconciliation, identified discrepancies in ledger audits, implemented new security protocols for digital assets, and I applied to one place, the Crest Point Integrity Bureau. It was a boutique firm in downtown Cleveland that specialized in internal fraud investigations for Fortune 500 companies. They were the people you called when you thought your CFO was buying yachts with company money. They were known for being ruthless, private, and mathematically precise. It was a long shot. I was an operations manager at a logistics company. I was not a forensic accountant yet, but I wrote a cover letter that didn't use a single template. I wrote about the pattern recognition of financial abuse. I wrote about the silence of numbers. In the meantime, the war at home was shifting from cold to hot. The pressure campaign was escalating. It wasn't just the Facebook post. It was the digital equivalent of a siege. My email inbox, the personal one I had secured, started receiving long, rambling messages from my father. They weren't angry. They were worse. They were pitiful. Emery, the heater is making that noise again. I don't know who to call. We don't have the funds for a repairman. I guess we will just sleep in the cold tonight. Hope you are warm. Then came the physical letters. My mother, realizing I wasn't answering calls, had started writing handwritten notes on floral stationery, mailing them to my apartment. Family is forgiveness. One read, "We forgive you for this outburst. Just come home." Vince brought the mail inside every day. He would lay the letters on the kitchen counter like little landmines, waiting for me to step on them. "Your mom sent another one," he said that evening. He was leaning against the fridge, watching me pour a glass of water. "She sounds really torn up. I talked to your dad today. He sounded weak." I paused, the water glass halfway to my mouth. "You talked to him?" I asked. "Yeah," Vince said, too casually. "He called to ask if I had seen you. He is worried about your mental health. We both are." "My mental health is fine," I said. "My financial health is the only thing that was critical." "You are obsessed," Vince said, shaking his head. "You are acting like they are criminals. They are your parents. And I am your husband. You are treating us like targets. If you feel like a target, Vince, maybe you should ask yourself why you are standing in the line of fire." I walked past him, but I didn't go to my room. I went to the entryway where we kept the shared calendar. I had noticed a pattern. Every evening at 6:30, Vince would announce he was taking the dog for a walk. We didn't have a big dog. We had a terrier that hated the rain, yet, rain or shine, Vince would go out for 45 minutes. I had started logging the times. Monday left at 6:30, returned at 7:15. Tuesday left at 6:30, returned at 7:20, and I had cross-referenced them with the times my father's missed calls appeared on my phone. They never called me between 6:30 and 7:15. They were coordinating. Vince wasn't walking the dog. He was holding strategy meetings. He was coaching them. "Don't push her too hard today. Try the guilt angle. She is still stonewalling." He was the double agent inside the wire. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting another guilt trip text from my dad. It was an Instagram DM. "Sabrina." I hesitated. I hadn't spoken to her since the Paris reveal. I clicked the message. "Emery, what is going on? Mom is posting crazy stuff on Facebook. Dad is saying you cut them off and stole their retirement. I am freaking out. I am in Paris and my card just got declined for the hotel extension. Did you do something? Please tell me what is happening. I didn't know about any of this drama. I read the message 3 times. I didn't know. It was the anthem of the privileged. She didn't know because she didn't look. She didn't know because she never asked where the money for the studio deposit came from. She didn't know because it was convenient to believe that money just appeared, like magic, whenever she needed it. I typed a reply, then deleted it. I typed another one. Ask Mom where the money for your branding studio came from. Ask Vince why his name is on the transfers. I hit send. I didn't tell her I loved her. I didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. I gave her the map and let her decide if she wanted to find the treasure or bury her head back in the sand. I went back to the guest room. My laptop was open. A new email had arrived 2 minutes ago. Subject interview request. Crest Point Integrity Bureau. My heart stopped, then restarted with a heavy, powerful thud. Dear Ms. Ramirez, we reviewed your application. Your approach to ledger discrepancies is distinct. We would like to bring you in for an initial interview this Friday at 10 in the morning. I stared at the screen. The logo of the firm was a shield. It was real. I wasn't just a crazy woman hoarding bank statements in a guest bedroom. I was a candidate. I was someone who saw the truth in the numbers. I felt a surge of power that had nothing to do with anger. It was capability. I clicked reply. I will be there. I closed the email tab and opened Facebook again. My mother's post had grown. It now had 43 likes and 20 comments. A cousin from Arizona had commented, "Ungrateful children are the curse of the modern age. Stay strong." Maria. Vince had commented on that one too. "We are hoping she comes around soon." That was it. The snap was audible in the silent room. It wasn't a snap of my sanity. It was the snap of the leash breaking. They wanted a public forum. They wanted to drag this into the sunlight to shame me. Fine. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. I cracked my knuckles. I didn't feel weepy. I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like an auditor. I hit comment. I did not write about my feelings. I did not write about my broken heart. I wrote Mom. Since we are discussing sacrifice and family support publicly, perhaps we should clarify the figures so everyone understands the extent of the situation. The betrayal you are referring to is my decision to stop the unauthorized use of my payroll. Item 1. $7,450 for global concierge services charged to my account on October 14th. See attached image. Item 2. $2,500 for Sabrina branding deposit transferred on November 12th. See attached image. Item 3. $42,000 in total transfers labeled support over the last 24 months, during which I was told the family was in dire financial straits. Item 4, $12,000 in consulting fees paid to VERR, consulting a company registered to my husband from our joint funds for tax preparation that was supposedly done for free. I have downloaded the full ledger for the last 3 years. If anyone in the family would like to see the itemized breakdown of where my ungratefulness went, I am happy to share the PDF. Enjoy the Paris trip. Sabrina. It cost exactly 6 months of my mortgage payments. I attached 4 photos: the bank statement showing the Paris charge, the transfer log for the branding studio, the screenshot of the VR consulting business registration, and a graph I had made showing the income versus outflow. I took a deep breath. I hit post. The screen refreshed. My comment sat there, a block of text and images, anchoring the bottom of the emotional thread like a concrete block. I closed the laptop. I turned off my phone. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat in the dark, listening to the silence. I knew what was coming. The explosion would be nuclear. But for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't the one standing at ground zero. I was the one watching from the bunker. I turned my phone back on at 6 o'clock the next morning. It vibrated in my hand for a solid 2 minutes. A continuous, angry buzz that felt like a swarm of hornets trying to escape the casing. The post was gone. My mother had deleted it sometime around 3 in the morning. She had scrubbed the photo, the caption about betrayal, and the hundreds of comments that had spiraled out of control, but she was not fast enough. The internet does not forget, and apparently, neither did my extended family. I opened my messages. There were 5 screenshots sent to me by 3 different cousins. They had captured my comment, the receipts, the graphs, the breakdown of the $42,000 before my mother panicked and pulled the plug. But the most surprising message came from my Aunt Elena, my father's older sister, a woman who usually sat in the corner at Thanksgiving and drank boxed wine in silence. Emery, she wrote, I saw what you posted. I saw what your mother deleted. I just want you to know that I'm not surprised. I watched them buy Sabrina a brand new Honda Civic when she was 16 while you were taking the bus to your job at the library. I watched them pay for her modeling classes while you were paying for your own textbooks. I never said anything because it was not my place. And I am sorry for that. You are doing the right thing. Keep the receipts. Love, Aunt Elena. I stared at the screen. Validation from the void. It made my throat tight. For years, I thought I was crazy. I thought I was imagining the disparity. But Aunt Elena had seen it. Everyone had seen it. They just hadn't said anything because the narrative Sabrina is special. Emery is strong was too convenient to disrupt. My phone rang. It was not my mother. It was not Vince. It was a French number. I answered. Emery? Sabrina's voice was ragged. She sounded like she had been crying for hours. I could hear the background noise of a busy street, likely a taxi line. Hello, Sabrina, I said. I did not ask how is Paris. I am at the airport, she choked out. I am coming home. I saw the screenshots. Jen sent them to me. Emery, is it true? Did you really pay for the studio deposit? Mom told me she won it in a bingo jackpot. She said the Paris trip was a bonus from Dad's pension plan. A bingo jackpot. I laughed. A harsh barking sound. Sabrina, Mom hasn't played bingo in 10 years, and Dad's pension pays out $600 a month. Yes, I paid for it. I paid for all of it. I didn't know, she sobbed. I swear to God, Emery, I didn't know. Vince told me he handled the logistics. He sent me this whole itinerary. He said it was part of a branding strategy. A branding strategy? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. What does that mean? I don't know, she wailed. He said that if I wanted to launch my lifestyle channel, I needed international content. He said he convinced Mom and Dad to invest in the asset. That is what he called me. The asset. The asset. My blood ran cold. Vince didn't talk about people like that. He talked about portfolios like that. Get on the plane, Sabrina, I said. Come straight to my apartment. Do not go to Mom and Dad's. Do not talk to Vince. Okay, she whispered. I am boarding now. I will be there in 9 hours. I hung up. The asset. I spent the rest of the day in a state of hyper-focus. I went to work. I sat through meetings. I smiled at Janelle when she gave me a thumbs up from across the break room. But my mind was grinding on that one word. Why would Vince, a man who hoarded pennies, invest $40,000 in my sister's flimsy influencer career? He didn't respect her. He used to make fun of her TikToks behind her back. Why send her to Paris? Why build her a studio? Unless the branding was just the packaging for something else. Sabrina arrived at my apartment at 8 o'clock that evening. She looked wrecked. The beret was gone. Her eyes were swollen. Her designer coat rumpled. She dragged a massive suitcase into my hallway and collapsed onto the floor. I feel sick, she said. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Water is in the fridge, I said. I was not going to coddle her. Sit at the table. We need to talk. She sat. She looked small. For the first time in her life, she didn't look like the golden child. She looked like a pawn that had been knocked off the board. You said Vince called you an asset, I said, sitting across from her with my laptop open. Show me. It wasn't a text, she said, fumbling with her phone. It was an email chain. He accidentally forwarded the whole thread to me when he sent my flight confirmation. I didn't read the bottom part until today. On the way to the airport. She slid the phone across the table. I looked at the screen. It was a thread between Vince, my mother, and my father. The date was 2 weeks ago. From Vince Russo to Maria Ramirez. Jose Ramirez. Subject RE Paris launch / timeline Maria. Jose. I booked the flights. First class, like we discussed. It is expensive, but we need her out of the country for at least 10 days. The optics have to be perfect. If she is posting from Paris, it validates the lifestyle income we are claiming on the application. It makes the cash flow look legitimate. Also, we need to keep Emery quiet and distracted. If she starts asking questions about the joint account balance before the 15th, stall her. Tell her it is a glitch. Buy her a small gift if you have to, not too expensive. I just need her eyes off the ball until the paperwork clears. Once the refinancing is approved and the funds hit, we can backfill the joint account and she will never know the difference. The house is the key. We have to secure the equity line against Emery's credit profile while her score is still in the 700s. If she finds out we are leveraging her name for the studio loan, she will freeze everything. Keep her happy. Keep her blind. Vince, I read the email twice. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. It wasn't just theft. It was laundering. They were using Sabrina's career as a front to claim income. They were sending her to Paris to create a paper trail of a high-net-worth lifestyle so they could qualify for a loan. But the loan wasn't for Sabrina. We have to secure the equity line against Emery's credit profile. They were taking out a home equity line of credit, but not on their house. Their house was mortgaged to the hilt. They had no equity left. They were taking it out on my condo, but they couldn't. I was on the deed. I was on the mortgage. Vince couldn't refinance our home without my signature. Unless, once the refinancing is approved and the funds hit, the email was dated 2 weeks ago. The 15th, I whispered. He said he needed me quiet until the 15th. Today was the 16th. I grabbed my laptop. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I logged into the credit monitoring site again. I had frozen my credit 2 days ago. But had I been fast enough, I refreshed the report. Inquiry. Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions. Date October 14th. 2 days before I froze it. Status approved. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? Sabrina asked, watching me. Emery, you are scaring me. What is it? They didn't just spend my savings, I said, my voice sounding hollow. They took out a second mortgage on my home. Vince applied for a home equity loan in my name. He used the Paris trip to get you out of the way, so he wouldn't have to answer questions about why he was spending money, and he used my parents to distract me while he processed the paperwork. But, Sabrina looked confused. Don't you have to sign that? Yes, I said. I do. I heard the key turn in the front door lock. The sound was loud in the silent apartment. Click, clack, the door swung open. Vince walked in. He was wearing his raincoat, shaking water off an umbrella. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had had a long day of damage control. Emery, he said, not looking up yet. I saw the post before your mom deleted it. That was really below the belt. We need to... He looked up. He saw the suitcase in the hallway. He looked into the dining room. He saw Sabrina. His face went slack. The color vanished from his skin so fast it looked like a magic trick. He dropped the umbrella. It clattered against the hardwood floor. Sabrina, he choked out. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Paris until next Tuesday. I came back, Sabrina said. Her voice was trembling, but she didn't look away. I saw the email. Vince, the one where you called me the asset. Vince's eyes darted from her to me. He licked his lips. I saw the gears turning in his head, the panic shifting into improvisation. You are misunderstanding, he said, walking into the room, holding his hands up. Sabrina, honey, that is business talk. It means you are valuable. We are building a brand for you. I sent you there to help you. You sent me there to hide me, she said. And you, Vince said, pivoting to me, his voice sharpening, becoming the voice of the aggrieved husband. You dragged her into this. You couldn't just keep our marital issues between us. You had to ruin her trip. You are so dramatic. Emery, you are addicted to the drama. Look at her. She is crying. This is your fault. It was a masterful performance. Darvo. Deny. Attack. Reverse victim and offender. I didn't take the bait. I didn't scream. I stood up. I walked over to the kitchen island where the mail pile sat. I had ignored it when I came in with Sabrina. There was a thick envelope on top. It had the logo of Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions. I picked it up. Vince stopped talking, his eyes fixed on the envelope. "Give me that," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. "Is this the paperwork?" I asked. "The paperwork you needed to finish by the 15th. Emery, give me the mail. It is addressed to both of us." "Actually," I said, looking at the window of the envelope, "it is addressed to Emery Ramirez and Vincent Russo." I ripped it open. Vince lunged. He actually took a step forward like he was going to tackle me, but he stopped when Sabrina stood up and threw her glass of water on the floor. The glass shattered, exploding into shards between him and me. "Stay away from her!" Sabrina screamed. It was a raw, guttural sound I had never heard from my sister before. Vince flinched. I pulled the papers out. "Congratulations on the approval of your home equity line of credit. Amount $150,000. Interest rate 7.5%. Disbursement date October 17th. That was tomorrow. I flipped to the signature page. There was Vince's signature, neat and loopy, and right next to it was mine, Emery Ramirez. It was an electronic signature. DocuSign, verified by IP address, validated by email confirmation. I looked at the email address listed under my signature. Emery Ramirez. Finances Gmail. The fake email, the digital puppet. He had signed for me. He had impersonated me to a federal lender. He had committed bank fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft, and he had done it while sleeping in the room next to mine. I looked up at him. He wasn't acting anymore. The mask was gone. He looked cornered. He looked dangerous. "You can't prove I signed that," he said, his voice low. "It is an electronic signature. You gave me permission. You told me to handle the finances. Any court will see this as a misunderstanding between spouses. I didn't give you permission to take out a mortgage on my house to fund a fake business for my sister so you could launder money to my parents," I said. "It is our house," he shouted, "and they are your parents. I did this for them. They were drowning." "Emery, your dad was going to lose the house I saved them because you wouldn't—" "You didn't save them," I said. "You put us $150,000 in debt. Where was that money going to go?" "Vince, into the joint account, into VR Consulting." "It doesn't matter," he yelled. "It is done. The loan is approved. The money hits tomorrow. If you call the bank, if you blow this up, you are blowing up your parents' lives. You are sending your father to the hospital with a heart attack. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the daughter who put her dad in the grave over money?" He was weaponizing my conscience. He was betting on the fact that I was the good one, the one who fixed things, the one who absorbed the pain so everyone else could be comfortable. I looked at Sabrina. She was staring at Vince with horror. She finally saw him, not the helpful brother-in-law, but the parasite. I looked at the signature again. Emery Ramirez. "You are right, Vince," I said quietly. "It is done." He let out a breath, his shoulders dropping. He thought he had won. He thought I was folding. "Good," he said, wiping his mouth. "Good. We can fix this. We just need to manage the cash flow. I mean the crime is done," I said. "The act is complete. You signed it." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the camera app. I took a photo of the signature page. I took a photo of the approval letter. Then I opened my email app. I composed a new email to frauddept, greatlakesmortgage.com, CC, Marcus Thorne, legal.com, Janelle, compliance, brightwell.com, subject, urgent, fraudulent application/identity theft report, loan 889201. "What are you doing?" Vince asked. Stepping over the broken glass, I am not blowing up the family, Vince, I said, hitting send. I am reporting a crime. I am the victim. You are the perpetrator. And Sabrina. I looked at my sister. Sabrina is the witness. Vince lunged for the phone, but I sidestepped him. I was faster. I was lighter. I was 30 years old. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the weight of 3 other adults on my back. Get out, I said. This is my house, he snarled. Not for long, I said. The police will be here in 10 minutes. I suggest you pack a bag unless you want to be wearing that suit in a holding cell. He stared at me. He looked for the fear. He looked for the hesitation. He found neither. He turned and ran to the bedroom. I listened to him throwing things into a suitcase. I listened to the zipper tearing. I listened to the front door slam. I looked at Sabrina. She was shaking. I am sorry, she whispered. Emery, I am so sorry. I know, I said. I looked at the confirmation on my screen. Message sent. The Paris trip was over. The party was over. Now, the audit began. The apartment felt vast without Vince in it. It was not the emptiness of loss. It was the spaciousness of decontamination. The air felt cleaner. The silence was not heavy. It was crisp. Sabrina was asleep on the sofa. Wrapped in a duvet I had pulled from the linen closet. She looked younger than 26. In her sleep, stripped of the Parisian pretenses and the filtered Instagram angles, she just looked like the little sister I used to carry on my hip. I did not sleep. I sat at the dining table. The glass shards swept away, but the ghost of the violence still hanging in the room. I was building the case file. I had the bank statements. I had the loan approval. But I needed to understand the architecture of the lie. A fraud of this magnitude, maintained over 24 months involving 3 different adults, was not an accident. It was a structure, and every structure has a blueprint. I opened the metadata for the email address Vince had used to sign the loan documents. Emery Ramirez, finances@gmail.com. In my initial rage, I had assumed he created it solely for the bank fraud. But as I dug into the recovery settings, a memory surfaced, cold and sharp as a needle. 3 years ago, I had been complaining about my inbox at work being cluttered with headhunter emails and spam. Vince had been sitting right there, at this same table, eating pasta. Let me help you organize, he had said, his voice so helpful, so eager. Why don't we set up a dedicated email for your professional stuff? A clean slate. I can set it up for you while you finish your report. One less thing for you to do. I had thanked him. I had told him he was the best husband in the world. I looked at the creation date of the account. It matched that evening exactly. He had created the account for me, handed me the password on a sticky note that I inevitably lost, and then he had kept the keys. He had been grooming my digital identity for theft 3 years before he actually stole the money. He wasn't just an opportunist who saw a pile of cash and grabbed it. He was a gardener who had planted the seeds of fraud and watered them patiently, waiting for the harvest. It made me feel sick in a way that had nothing to do with money. It was a violation of the bed we slept in. Every time he held me, every time he whispered that we were a team, he was mentally calculating the yield on his investment. I looked over at Sabrina. She stirred, waking up. Emery, she croaked. I am here, I said. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Is he coming back? No, I said. He is not. She pulled the duvet tighter. I need to tell you something. I was thinking about it all night. Tell me. The money, she said, her voice trembling. Whenever I asked Mom or Dad how we could afford things, the car, the studio, the trip, they always said the same thing. They said, Emery agreed to it, and when I would say, really, Emery seems so stressed about money, Vince would jump in. What would he say? I asked, though I already knew the shape of the lie. He would say, Emery is so busy with her career. She forgets what she promised. She gives us the go-ahead, but then she gets overwhelmed and panics about the budget. We just handle the details so she doesn't have to worry. I closed my eyes. Emery is Forgetful. It was the perfect cover. It used my greatest strength, my work ethic, against me. It painted me as the absent-minded executive who threw money at her family to make them go away, and then forgot she did it. It turned my competence into a liability, and his manipulation into a service. He gaslighted you, I said, and he gaslighted them. I believed him, Sabrina whispered, because it was easier to believe you were generous and forgetful than to believe you were being robbed. Get dressed, I said, standing up. We are going to see a lawyer. We met Marcus Thorne at 9 a.m. His office was not in a glass tower. It was in a brownstone in a quiet part of the city, the kind of place that smelled of old paper and aggressive litigation. Janelle had been right. Marcus looked like a man who ate bullies for breakfast. He wore a suit that cost more than my car. And he listened to my story without blinking. I laid it all out. The timeline, the shell company, the fake email, the home equity loan application with the forged digital signature. Marcus looked at the documents. He tapped a gold pen against the desk. This is not a divorce case, Mrs. Russo, he said. His voice was gravel. This is a RICO case disguised as a marriage. Can we stop the loan? I asked. The disbursement is scheduled for today. We can do more than stop it, Marcus said. We can freeze the liquidity of every person involved. But you need to understand the exposure here. Your husband didn't just commit fraud against you. He committed fraud against a federally insured lender. If we trigger this, he is looking at prison time, real time, 5 to 10 years. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. Are you ready to send your husband to federal prison? I thought about the email, the asset. I thought about the 3 years of Emery is Forgetful. I thought about the $30,000 hole in my future. He sent himself, I said. I am just the one turning on the lights. Good, Marcus said. Here is the strategy. We file for an emergency injunction to freeze the marital assets. We file a police report for identity theft regarding the loan, and we notify the bank's fraud department immediately to halt the wire. What about my job? I asked. Vince works in finance. He knows people. He knows my boss. We get ahead of it, Marcus said. We draft a preemptive statement to your HR department. We frame it as a protective measure against a spouse undergoing a mental health and financial crisis. We control the narrative. We spent the next 3 hours drafting affidavits. Sabrina sat in the corner, signing witness statements. She detailed the Paris lie, the branding studio payments, the conversations she had witnessed. She was crying as she signed, but the pen didn't shake. When we left the office, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Vince. We need to talk. Now. I ignored it. 5 minutes later, another text. I am contacting Brightwell. I am going to tell them about the creative accounting you did on the logistics budget last year. I think they will be very interested to know why their operations manager is commingling personal and business funds. I stopped walking. The sidewalk seemed to sway. What is it? Sabrina asked. I showed her the phone. She asked. Did you do anything with the logistics budget? No, I said. Of course not. But that doesn't matter. In my industry, the accusation alone triggers an audit. An audit means suspension. Suspension means I lose my clearance for the Certified Financial Crimes Specialist exam. He is trying to nuke my career. It was a desperate move. It was the move of a man who realized the walls were closing in and decided to burn the building down with him. He is bluffing, Sabrina said. He has nothing. He doesn't need proof to ruin my reputation, I said. He just needs to sow doubt. My phone rang. It was Vince. I looked at the screen. The name husband flashed against the background photo of our wedding day. I realized I hadn't changed the contact name yet. I answered. You are playing a dangerous game, Emery, Vince said. His voice was smooth, terrifyingly calm. It was the voice of the man who sold the lie to my parents for years. I am not playing, Vince, I said. I am reporting. If you report that loan, he said, I will burn you. I will send an email to your VP. I will attach proof. It is easy enough to fabricate. You know that you have been skimming from the shipping accounts. By the time you clear your name, you will be unhireable, and your parents. They will be homeless, because if I go down, the payments stop, the house goes, everything goes. You are threatening me with my own money, I said. I am negotiating, he said. Here is the deal. You retract the fraud report. You let the loan fund. We use the $150,000 to pay off your parents' debts and clean up the mess. Then, we divorce quietly. You get the condo. I take the debt. We walk away. It sounded like a lifeline. It sounded reasonable. Just let the crime happen, and I will fix it. But I knew better. If the loan funded, I was on the hook. I was the co-borrower. If he took the money and ran, which he absolutely would, I would be left with a $150,000 debt and a foreclosed home. I need to think, I said. I made my voice wobble. I let a little bit of the old Emery, the scared Emery, leak into the tone. Don't think too long, Vince said. Sensing weakness. The wire hits at 5. You need to call the bank and verify the signature before then. If they flag it, the deal is off, and the email to your boss goes out. Okay, I said. Okay. Vince, please don't email him. I can't lose this job. Then be smart, he said. Let's meet. Tonight. Dinner. Neutral ground. We can sign a post-nup agreement that protects you. I will bring the papers. 7 o'clock at the Chop House. Okay, I whispered. 7 o'clock. I hung up. Sabrina grabbed my arm. You are not actually going to meet him. He is dangerous. I looked at her. The fear was gone. The cold was back. I am going, I said. But I am not going to negotiate. I called Marcus back immediately. He wants a meeting, I said. He is threatening extortion against my employer. Did you record the call? Marcus asked. No, I said. I was on the street. Then we need him to say it again, Marcus said. We need him to admit to the fraud and the extortion on tape. Ohio is a one-party consent state. You can record him as long as you are part of the conversation. He chose a restaurant, I said. Public place. Hard to get clear audio. Get a private room, Marcus said. Tell him you want privacy to cry. Narcissists love privacy when they think they are winning. And the loan, I asked. We let the bank know to flag it but not to decline it yet, Marcus said. We keep it in pending status. Let him think the money is coming. If he thinks he has won, he will get sloppy. He will brag. I went home. I showered. I put on the dress Vince liked best, a navy blue sheath that made me look professional but soft. I put on my pearls. Then, I taped a digital recorder to the inside of my purse. I activated the voice memo app on my phone and slipped it into my pocket. I put a backup recorder in my bra. I was not walking into a dinner. I was walking into a sting operation. Be careful, Sabrina said as I walked to the door. She was holding a cup of tea, looking terrified. He is cornered. Cornered animals bite, I said, checking my lipstick in the mirror. But hunters shoot. I drove to the Chop House. It was an upscale steakhouse. Dark wood and leather booths, the kind of place Vince took clients to impress them. He was waiting in the lobby. He looked impeccable. Suit, tie, freshly shaved. He didn't look like a man whose life was collapsing. He looked like a winner. Emery, he said, reaching out to touch my elbow. I didn't pull away. I let him touch me. It made my skin crawl, but I needed him to feel in control. I got a private room, I said softly. I didn't want people to see me if I get upset. Good idea, he said, steering me toward the back. Smart? We sat in a small room off the main dining area. The waiter came and went. Vince ordered a bottle of Cabernet. $120. He was spending my money to the very end. When the door clicked shut, the air in the room changed. Vince poured the wine. He leaned back, swirling the glass. I am glad you came to your senses, he said. This whole detective act doesn't suit you. You are a builder, not a destroyer. I just want it to be over, I said, keeping my hands on the table, near my purse. But Vince, I am scared. If the bank finds out I didn't sign that paper. They won't, he said, taking a sip, because you are going to ratify it. That is the word. You are going to tell them. Yes, I authorized my husband to sign for me. Simple. But the email, I said. The fake email. You used it to impersonate me. I used it to facilitate the transaction, he corrected. Look, Emery, the technicalities don't matter. The result matters. The money hits. We pay your parents' debt. We pay off the cards. And you walk away clean. And the threat? I asked. About my job. Vince smiled. It was a cold, reptile smile. Insurance, he said. As long as you behave, that email stays in my drafts folder. But if you try to pull another stunt like freezing the credit or calling the police, I hit send. And you know, Brightwell, they have zero tolerance for embezzlement rumors. You will be walked out by security in 10 minutes. I felt the recorder against my chest. Extortion, confirmed. Fraud admission, confirmed. What about Sabrina? I asked. You used her. You called her an asset. She is an asset, Vince said, shrugging. She is a pretty face with no income. We gave her a purpose. We gave her a trip to Paris. Everyone won. Emery, why are you the only one complaining? Because I am the one paying for it, I said. You are the provider. Vince said. That is your role. You are the strong one. You carry the load. I just help you balance it. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document. Here, he said. This is a statement for the bank. It says you authorized the signature on October 14th. Sign it, and we are done. He slid the paper across the table. He uncapped a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc I had bought him for our first anniversary, and held it out to me. I looked at the pen. I looked at his face. He looked so confident. He thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he had outmaneuvered the quiet, hard-working wife. I took the pen. I looked down at the paper. Then I looked up at him. No, I said. Vince's smile faltered. What? I said no, I said, my voice dropping the wobble, dropping the fear. I spoke with the clear, hard diction of the woman who had spent the last 3 nights studying federal sentencing guidelines. Emery, don't be stupid, he hissed, leaning forward. Do you want to lose your job tonight? You won't send that email, Vince, I said. Try me. You won't send it because you are not going to have access to your phone in about 5 minutes. Vince frowned. What are you talking about? I didn't come here to negotiate, I said. I came here to get you on tape. I reached into my purse and pulled out the recorder. The red light was steady. Vince stared at it. His face went gray. You recorded this. Every word, I said. The extortion, the admission of the fake signature, the laundering through Sabrina. You can't use that, he stammered, standing up. This is a private conversation between spouses. Not when it involves the commission of a felony, I said, and not when there is a third party listening. Vince spun around to look at the door. Who? Not at the door, I said. On the phone. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The call timer was running. 45 minutes. Say hello to Detective Miller from the Economic Crimes Unit, I said. I put the phone on speaker. Mr. Russo. A deep voice crackled from the speaker. This is Detective Miller. We have officers at the front entrance and the rear exit. I need you to step out of the room with your hands visible. Vince looked at the phone. He looked at me. The arrogance drained out of him like water from a cracked vessel, leaving nothing but a terrified, small man in an expensive suit. Emery, he whispered. Please. It was the first time he had begged. I stood up. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt the immense, heavy relief of a job finished. You said I was the provider. Vince, I said, picking up my purse. You were right. I am providing you with the consequences you earned. I walked to the door. Don't leave me, he shouted, his voice cracking. I didn't look back. I opened the door and walked out into the restaurant. 2 uniformed officers passed me in the hallway, heading toward the private room. One of them nodded at me. I walked through the lobby, out the front door, and into the cool night air. I took a deep breath. It was over. The marriage was over. The fraud was stopped. But the hardest part was still to come. I had dealt with the husband. Now, I had to deal with the parents who had sold me out to him. I got into my car. I checked my phone. One notification. Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions application denied. Due to fraud alert. I smiled. I started the car and drove toward my parents' house. It was time for the final audit. The venue I selected was a private dining room at the Gilded Fork, a bistro halfway between my office and my parents' house. It was chosen for its acoustics, thick carpets, heavy velvet curtains, and solid oak doors that kept sound in. But the most important feature of the room was the connecting door to the service pantry. Behind that door, sitting on folding chairs amidst crates of wine and stacks of napkins, were 2 men. One was Marcus Thorne, my lawyer. The other was David Henderson, a senior fraud investigator from Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions. They were drinking sparkling water and listening to a live audio feed from the microphone I had placed in the floral centerpiece. I arrived 20 minutes early. I sat at the head of the table, my hands folded on top of a single manila folder. I checked the angle of the centerpiece. I checked my watch. 7 o'clock. The door opened. Vince walked in first. He was wearing the same suit from yesterday, but his tie was loosened, his top button undone. He looked like a man who was holding up the weight of the sky. He held the door open, ushering my parents in with a deferential nod. "See?" Vince said, his voice dripping with forced optimism. "She is here. She wants to fix this." My mother, Maria, walked in like a dethroned queen entering exile. She was wearing her Sunday church dress and a pair of pearl earrings I knew Vince had bought her for Christmas 2 years ago using my bonus check. She didn't look at me. She looked at the wall, at the chandelier. Anywhere but my face, my father, Jose, followed. He looked shrunken. He was a man who had spent 30 years letting his wife drive the car, even when she was steering them off a cliff. Sabrina came last. She looked pale. Her eyes red-rimmed, wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She didn't sit with them. She walked around the table and took the seat to my right. The battle lines were drawn before a single word was spoken. "Thank you all for coming," I said. My voice was calm, unnaturally calm. It was the voice of a woman who had already read the last page of the book. "We didn't have a choice, did we?" my mother snapped, slamming her purse onto the table. "Vince said you were threatening to go to the police, against your own father, Emery." "Really?" "I didn't threaten to go to the police, Mom," I said. "I said I would file a report regarding identity theft. If that leads back to Dad, that is a consequence of his actions, not my malice." "It is a misunderstanding," she hissed. "We were going to pay it back. Vince had a plan. But you always have to be so rigid, so cold. You get that from your grandfather. You know, he counted every penny, too." Vince stepped in, holding up his hands like a referee. Okay, let's lower the temperature. We are here to eat. We are here to talk like a family. Emery, why don't we order some wine and just breathe?" "I am not thirsty," I said, "and I am not here to eat." I opened the manila folder. Inside were 4 copies of a document Marcus had drafted that afternoon. It was a settlement agreement and release of claims. I slid a copy to my mother, one to my father, one to Vince. "This is how we end this," I said. "Tonight, without the police, without the courts." Vince picked up the paper. I watched his eyes scan the legal jargon. I saw the moment his jaw tightened. "What is this?" my father asked, squinting at the fine print. "It is a confession, Dad," I said, "and a repayment plan." "I am not signing a confession," my mother spat, pushing the paper away. "Let me summarize it for you," I said. "Clause 1. You acknowledge that the $42,000 transferred from my accounts over the last 2 years was unauthorized. You agree to repay 50% of it over the next 5 years. I am forgiving the other half. Forgiving? My mother laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You are forgiving us for raising you for putting a roof over your head. Clause 2, I continued, ignoring her. Vince agrees to immediately withdraw the application for the home equity line of credit with Great Lakes Mortgage Solutions and acknowledges that my signature on the application was falsified. Vince flinched. He looked at the centerpiece, then back at me. Clause 3, I said, looking directly at my mother. You will cease all public defamation immediately. No more Facebook posts. No more crying to the ants. You issue a retraction stating that there was a banking error. And if we don't, Vince asked softly. If you don't, I said, I walk out of this room, I pick up my phone, and I authorize the fraud investigation to proceed to the prosecution phase. The bank has the IP logs. Vince, they know the application came from your laptop. They know the email was created on your device. Silence descended on the room. The waiter hovered at the door, saw the tension, and wisely retreated. You would send your husband to jail, my mother asked, her voice trembling with rage. After he has taken care of us, after he treated you like a princess. He didn't treat me like a princess, Mom, I said. He treated me like a host, and he treated you like parasites. Don't you call me that, she shrieked, standing up, her chair scraped violently against the floor. I sacrificed everything for you. I worked double shifts, and this is how you repay me by counting coins, by humiliating your sister. Leave Sabrina out of this, I said. Sabrina needed that trip, my father piped up, his voice whining. She was depressed. Emery, she was lost. We just wanted to give her a spark. You have a career. You have stability. Why are you so greedy that you can't share a little bit of your luck? Luck. I slammed my hand on the table. The sound cracked like a whip. I worked 60-hour weeks for 10 years. I drove a 10-year-old car while you bought Sabrina a new one. That isn't luck. That is labor. And you stole it. We borrowed it, Vince interjected, trying to regain control. Emery, listen to me. You are listening to bad advice. That lawyer friend of yours, Janelle, right, she is poisoning your head. This isn't fraud. It is creative financing. Every family does it. Every family takes out secret mortgages in their children's names. I asked. It wasn't a secret, Vince said, his facade slipping. We talked about refinancing last year. You agreed in principle. I expedited the paperwork because the rates were locked. The loan officer, Gary, he said if we didn't sign by the 15th, we would lose the 6% rate. I was saving us money. I froze. I looked at Vince. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Gary, I asked. Vince blinked. What? You just said the loan officer's name is Gary, I said, and you said the rate was 6%. So, I never showed you the approval letter. Vince, I said, I only saw it yesterday. I never told you the rate, and I certainly never told you the name of the loan officer. Vince's mouth opened, then closed. If you were innocent, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. If you truly thought I had signed it, why would you know the details of a conversation I supposedly had with a loan officer I never met? Vince stammered. I must have seen it in the mail. The mail was sealed until I opened it yesterday, I said. You negotiated the loan, you spoke to Gary, you pretended to be me on the phone, didn't you? Or did you hire a woman to do it? Emery, stop, he said, sweat breaking out on his forehead. You are twisting things. I am not twisting anything, I said. I am untying the knot. Stop it, my mother yelled. Stop attacking him. He did it for us. He is the only one who cares about this family. He did it for himself. The voice came from my right. We all turned. Sabrina was standing up. Her hands were shaking, clutching the edge of the table. Sabrina, sit down, my mother snapped. No, Sabrina said. Her voice was thin, but it held. "He didn't do it for you, Mom, and he didn't do it for me." "Sabrina, honey, don't," Vince warned, his eyes narrowing. "He promised me the Paris trip was a branding exercise," Sabrina said, looking at our parents. "But do you know what he asked me to do once I got there? He asked me to open a French bank account. He said it was for international transaction fees, but the paperwork, it wasn't a checking account. It was a holding shell." My father looked confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, looking at Vince, "that he wasn't just using the loan to pay your debts. He was planning to funnel a portion of the $150,000 offshore. He was going to wash the money through Sabrina's business in Paris." "That is a lie," Vince said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I have the email." "Vince," Sabrina said, pulling her phone out, "you sent it to me 3 days ago. Sign these forms when you land. Do not translate them. Just sign." She threw the phone onto the table. It slid across the linen and stopped in front of my father. "He wasn't saving you," Sabrina said to our parents, tears streaming down her face. "He was using me as a mule. And he was using Emery as the bank. And you let him? You clapped for him." My mother looked at the phone. She looked at Vince, for the first time. The blind adoration in her eyes flickered. "Vince," she whispered, "is that true?" Vince looked around the room. He saw the walls closing in. He saw the doubt in my mother's eyes, the betrayal in Sabrina's, the ice in mine. The good husband mask dissolved. He didn't scream. He didn't apologize. He adjusted his cufflinks. He stood up and walked slowly around the table until he was standing behind my chair. My father started to speak. "Now, hold on, if there is a misunderstanding." Vince ignored him. He leaned down. He brought his face so close to my ear I could smell the expensive cologne I had bought him for his birthday. "You think you are clever, Emery," he whispered. The sound was low, intimate, terrifying. "You think having a lawyer makes you safe, but you forgot one thing. I didn't move." I stared straight ahead at the centerpiece. "I know the passwords," he whispered. "Not just the bank, the server at Brightwell, the logistics mainframe." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I have been logging in as you for 3 years," he murmured. "I have planted things, small irregularities, a diverted shipment here, a missing invoice there. Nothing big, just enough to look like incompetence or embezzlement." He paused, letting the threat sink in. "If you don't sign a statement tonight clearing me of this loan," he hissed, "I send an anonymous tip to your compliance officer tomorrow morning. They will audit your terminal, and they will find the files I planted. You will be fired for cause. You will be blacklisted. You will never work in this industry again." He pulled back slightly, his hand resting heavily on my shoulder. "So," he said, loud enough for the table to hear, "are we ready to sign the agreement? Or do we need to discuss the consequences of your professional negligence?" My mother looked hopeful. She didn't hear the threat, only the tone of authority. "See, Vince has a plan. Just listen to him, Emery." I sat there, feeling the weight of his hand on my shoulder. It felt like a shackle. He thought he had checkmated me. He thought the threat to my career was the ultimate trump card, but he had made a fatal error. He assumed he was the only one in the room who knew how to set a trap. I reached into my purse. "You are right, Vince," I said loud and clear. "I should think about my career." "Smart girl," he smirked. "But before I sign," I said, "could you clarify one thing? The files you planted on the Brightwell server, did you upload them using the VPN, or did you use my physical credentials?" Vince laughed softly. "Does it matter? They are under your user ID. You own them." "So you admit you altered the corporate records?" I asked. "I admit," he whispered, leaning in again, "that I own you." I smiled. "Mr. Henderson," I said to the floral centerpiece, "did you get that?" Vince froze. The door to the service pantry flew open. Marcus Thorne walked out, adjusting his tie. Behind him, David Henderson, the man from the bank. stepped into the light, holding a tablet that was displaying the audio waveform of the last 2 minutes. "We got it. Ms. Ramirez," Henderson said, his voice booming in the small room. "Loud and clear." Vince's hand fell from my shoulder. He stumbled back, knocking into the waiter who was trying to re-enter. "Who are you?" Vince demanded, his voice cracking. "David Henderson, Great Lakes Mortgage Fraud Unit," he said, flashing a badge. "And that," he pointed to the phone on the table, "was a confession to federal wire fraud, identity theft, and corporate sabotage." My mother gasped. Covering her mouth, my father looked like he was having a stroke. Vince looked at the pantry door. He looked at the exit. "You set me up," he snarled at me. "No, Vince," I said, standing up and smoothing my dress. "I just audited you." "I will ruin you," he shouted. Lunging toward me, Marcus stepped in between us, broad-shouldered and calm. "Mr. Russo, the police are currently entering the lobby. I suggest you save your energy for your public defender." Vince looked at the door. We could hear the commotion outside, the heavy footsteps, the static of radios. He looked back at me one last time. There was no love left, only the pure, distilled hatred of a narcissist who has been unmasked. "You will regret this," he spat. "You are nothing without me. You are just a lonely, bitter clerk." "Maybe," I said. "But tomorrow, I will be a clerk with a clean credit report, and you will be inmate number something or other." The door to the private room burst open. 2 uniformed officers stepped in. "Vincent Russo?" one asked. Vince straightened his jacket. He didn't look at my parents. He didn't look at Sabrina. He looked at me. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for me," I answered, as they handcuffed him and led him out, passing my sobbing mother and my stunned father. I sat back down. I picked up the wine list. "Sabrina," I said, my voice steady, "would you like a glass of Pinot? I think we have something to celebrate." The sun rose over Cleveland the next morning with a blinding, indifferent brightness. It was the kind of clear autumn light that exposes the dust on the windowsills and the cracks in the pavement. At 9 o'clock in the morning, exactly as he had promised, Vince tried to destroy me. I was sitting in the office of the Vice President of Operations at Brightwell Client Systems. Janelle was there, standing by the window with her arms crossed. The VP, a stern man named Mr. Henderson, sat behind his desk. His computer pinged. "There it is," Henderson said, looking at the screen. He turned the monitor so we could see. "Subject urgent whistleblower report. Internal embezzlement. From a concerned citizen 88, protonmail.com." The email was a masterpiece of fiction. It detailed a complex scheme where I was supposedly diverting shipping refunds into a private account. It claimed to have attached ledger proof of my misconduct. It used words like gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty. If I had walked into work that morning blind, I would have been escorted out by security before I could even finish my coffee. I would have been suspended pending an investigation that could drag on for months, effectively killing my chances at the new job with Crestpoint. But I wasn't blind. I was the one holding the flashlight. "He attached the modified Excel files," Janelle noted, leaning in. "Just like he said he would." "Mr. Henderson," I said, placing a flash drive on the desk. The files attached to that email were created on a device with the IP address ending in 442. That is the same IP address used to digitally sign a fraudulent home equity loan application in my name 2 days ago. It is also the IP address of the laptop currently sitting in the police evidence locker, which belongs to my estranged husband, Vincent Russo. I slid a second document across the desk. It was a sworn affidavit from Marcus Thorne, detailing the extortion attempt recorded at the restaurant the night before. "This is not a whistleblower report," I said. "This is retaliation from a suspect in an active federal investigation." Henderson looked at the email. He looked at the affidavit. He looked at me. "I have never seen someone audit their own assassination attempt before," he said, a look of grim respect on his face. "I like to be thorough," I said. "We will forward this to the police to add to his file." Henderson said, hitting a key on his keyboard. "And Emery, you are cleared. Go take the rest of the day. You have a war to finish." The booby trap Vince had set for me hadn't just failed. It had snapped back and broken his own fingers. By sending that email, he had proven intent. He had proven malice. And he had proven that he was dumb enough to leave a digital fingerprint on a crime scene he created. By noon, the legal net had tightened from a mesh to a stranglehold. My phone rang. It was David from the bank. "We verified the device ID," he said, his voice crisp and professional. The signature on the loan documents was executed on an iPad registered to Vincent Russo. We also tracked the geolocation. At the moment the document was signed, your phone was pinging off a tower near your office, while the signing device was pinging off the Wi-Fi router in your home. Unless you have a telepathic connection to your husband's tablet, you were not the one holding the pen. "So the loan is dead?" I asked. "The loan is voided," David said, "and we are filing charges for wire fraud. But Emery, there is something else." "What?" "We found a secondary applicant listed in the initial draft of the paperwork. Before it was switched to just you and Vince, it looks like he tried to get co-signers before he decided to forge your name." "Who?" I asked, though I felt the answer sitting heavy in my gut. "Maria and Jose Ramirez," David said. "They were listed as non-occupying co-borrowers. They provided their social security numbers and income statements. They were removed because their debt-to-income ratio was too high, but they were part of the application process." I closed my eyes. They knew. My parents hadn't just been passive recipients of the money. They hadn't just been confused by Vince's financial wizardry. They had actively applied for the loan with him. They knew he was trying to leverage the house. They knew he was desperate. And when the bank said no to them, they stood by and watched him steal my identity instead. "Thank you, David," I said. I hung up. I called Marcus. "Bring them in," I said. "All of them. Today." The conference room at Marcus Thorne's law firm was designed to intimidate. The table was a slab of granite. The view from the window was a panoramic shot of the city skyline, looking down on the streets where normal people lived their lives. My parents sat on one side. They looked small. My mother was clutching a tissue. My father was staring at his hands. Vince was not there. Vince was currently being processed at the county jail, unable to make bail because Marcus had successfully argued that he was a flight risk with offshore accounts in France, but his presence was felt in the room. Marcus sat at the head of the table. I sat next to him. "This is a formal notification," Marcus began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "We have filed for an immediate freeze on all assets connected to Mr. Russo because of the commingling of funds. This includes the accounts he managed for you, Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez." "You can't do that," my mother cried, her voice shrill but shaky. "That is our pension. That is our social security." "It is the proceeds of fraud," Marcus corrected. "And until we untangle what is yours and what was stolen from Emery, nobody touches a dime." "Emery, please," my father pleaded, looking at me. "We didn't know he was going to forge your name. We told him not to. We said, 'Ask Emery first.' He told us you were too busy. He told us he would handle it." "He told you?" I asked, opening the file in front of me. "Or did you help him try?" I slid the paper David had sent me across the granite. It was the initial loan application. "This is your handwriting, Dad," I said, pointing to the bottom of page 3. "And this is yours, Mom. You filled out a co-borrower application on October 2nd. You knew he was trying to get $150,000 out of my house." My father's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother went pale. "We thought it was a formality," she stammered. "Vince said he needed our credit to boost the score. We were trying to help the family." "You were helping him rob me," I said. "You were willing to risk my home, my credit, and my future, so you could keep living a lifestyle you couldn't afford. You were willing to bury me in debt just to keep Sabrina in Paris and yourselves in comfort." "We are your parents," my mother shouted, the old entitlement flaring up one last time. We raised you, we made you who you are, you owe us. I owe you respect, I said, my voice hard as iron. I do not owe you a felony. I pressed a button on the laptop in front of me. The voice of Vince Russo filled the room, clear and terrifying, recorded from the private dining room the night before. If you don't sign a statement tonight clearing me of this loan, I send an anonymous tip to your compliance officer tomorrow morning. I admit that I own you. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother looked at the laptop. She looked at me. For the first time, she didn't see the daughter she could bully. She didn't see the ATM. She saw the woman who had just outmaneuvered a sociopath. He threatened you, she whispered. He really threatened you. He threatened me because he knew he had you in his pocket, I said. He knew you would take his side, and you did, last night at dinner. You defended him. You attacked me. You chose the predator because he promised to feed you. My father put his head in his hands and began to weep. It wasn't a noble cry. It was the sound of a man realizing he had sold his dignity for a checking account. What happens now? My mother asked, her voice trembling. Are you going to send us to jail, too? I looked at them. I looked at the people who had given me life and then tried to consume it. No, I said. I am not Vince. I don't destroy people for sport. I pushed a document toward them. This is a repayment plan, I said. It is not negotiable. You will sell the second car. You will downsize your house. You will pay back the $42,000 you took from the joint account. Not all at once, but every month, until it is gone. But we will have nothing, my mother gasped. You will have your Social Security, I said. You will have a small apartment. You will have the truth. That is more than you gave me. I stood up. And Mom, I said, if you ever post about me on Facebook again, if you ever try to guilt trip me about sacrifice, I will hand this loan application to the district attorney. This is your one and only warning. Do not test me. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them crumble. I knew what it looked like. I had been crumbling for 30 years. I found Sabrina in the lobby. She was sitting on a bench, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked out. Did they sign? She asked. They signed, I said. She nodded. She stood up. She looked different. The vacuous, influencer shine was gone. She looked tired, but she looked real. I posted it, she said. She showed me her screen. It was a text post on Instagram. No filters, no hashtags. To everyone following my Paris journey, I lied. The trip wasn't a gift. It was funded by money that was stolen from my sister, Emery. I didn't know the details, but I didn't ask questions because I liked the attention. I allowed myself to be used as a prop in a scheme that hurt the only person who has ever actually taken care of me. I am coming home. I am getting a job, and I am going to spend the next few years paying back every cent I wasted. I am sorry, especially to Emery, who is the only one of us who deserves to be proud. I read the words, the only one of us who deserves to be proud. I felt a lump in my throat. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Forgiveness takes time, but it was a start. Come on, I said to her. Let's go get some coffee. I think you are going to need the caffeine if you are going to start looking for a job tomorrow. I am applying at the bakery, she said, a small, sad smile touching her lips. I figured I should learn how to actually make a croissant before I pretend to eat one again. 2 weeks later, the ink on the divorce papers was dry. The restraining order was permanent. Vince was awaiting trial, and his lawyer was already trying to cut a plea deal that involved him rolling over on his business partners in the shell company. I didn't care. He was in my rearview mirror. I stood in the center of a living room. It was empty. The walls were painted a soft, dove gray. The floors were hardwood, scratched and worn, but solid. It was a small bungalow on the west side of Cleveland. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't a mansion. It needed a new roof, and the kitchen cabinets were from the 90s. But my name was the only one on the deed. The door opened. Janelle walked in, carrying a box of pizza. Sabrina followed her, holding a bottle of cheap champagne and a small white box. "It echoes in here," Janelle said, kicking the door shut. "We need to get you some rugs." "I like the echo," I said. "It sounds like space." Sabrina set the box on the folding table I had set up in the middle of the room. She opened it. Inside was a cake. It wasn't a grocery store cake. It was homemade. It was lopsided. The frosting was a little runny. It said, "Happy 30th, the real one," in red icing. "I made it," Sabrina said, looking nervous. "I know I'm not a baker yet. It might taste like sawdust." "It looks perfect," I said. Janelle popped the champagne. The cork flew across the room and hit the wall. We laughed. It was a real laugh, loud and unburdened. Sabrina stuck a single candle in the center of the cake. She lit it. The flame flickered, illuminating the empty room, illuminating the faces of the two women standing with me, my boss, my sister, my chosen family. "Make a wish," Janelle said. I looked at the flame. I thought about the last 30 years. I thought about the girl who tried to buy love with obedience. I thought about the woman who thought being strong meant suffering in silence. I didn't need to wish for anything. I had the job at Crest Point. I started on Monday. I had the house. I had the truth. I leaned in. "I wish," I whispered, "that I never forget that I am enough." I blew out the candle. The smoke curled up into the air, vanishing into the rafters of my own home. I cut the cake. It was dense and too sweet. But as I took the first bite, it tasted better than anything I had ever eaten in Paris, or Cleveland, or anywhere else on earth. It tasted like freedom. Thank you so much for listening to Emery's story. It is a long road from betrayal to justice, but sometimes you have to burn the old life down to build a new one. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Drop your country or city in the comments below. Let's see how far our community reaches. And if you enjoyed this story of grit and payback, please subscribe to Juliet Revenge Stories, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this video reach more people who might need a reminder that they are strong enough to fight back. Stay safe, and keep your receipts.